Welcome to the AI Hustle Podcast, the podcast where we break down the latest in AI news, tools, and interview experts helping you hustle and do more using AI. If you've been following the podcast for a while, you'll know that over the last 6 months, I've been working on a stealth AI startup. Of the hundreds of projects I've covered, this is the one that I believe has the greatest potential. So today I'm excited to announce AIBox. AIBox is a no-code AI app building platform paired with the App Store for AI that lets you monetize your AI tools. The platform lets you build apps by linking together AI models like ChatGPT, Midjourney, and 11 Labs. Eventually will integrate with software like Gmail, Trello, and Salesforce, so you can use AI to automate every function in your organization. To get notified when we launch and be one of the first to build on the platform, you can join the waitlist at aibox.ai. The link is in the show notes. We are currently raising a seed round of funding. If you're an investor that is focused on disruptive tech, I'd love to tell you more about the platform. You can reach out to me at jaden@aibox.ai. I'll leave that email in the show notes. On the podcast today, we're going to talk about some of the limitations of ChatGPT. And this is going to be kind of an interesting thing because a lot of people have been asking, people may have noticed if you try to put a massive document into ChatGPT and ask it a question, it is unable to do that if the content is too big. And it also, as you know, will only give you responses that are kind of bite-sized. It has kind of a max length of response, and sometimes it cuts itself off before it even finishes a sentence, and you got to say continue to get it to continue generating the full response that you're working on. So on the podcast today, we're going to talk about these limitations, what causes them, and I'll go over really briefly how this works from a technical perspective. So it's very interesting insights you're going to get into ChatGPT today. So let's dive in. First is at a high level, the way ChatGPT is working. Essentially, it's got an input from the user. That's you giving it a text question, a prompt. It does what is called encoding. So the input text that you give it is converted into numerical representations that the model, ChatGPT, can understand. So it's not really reading the words that you're saying and understanding them. It has meaning assigned to every word, and every, based off of all the content it was trained on, it has numerical values that it assigns to different words and phrases and sentences so it can really understand their meaning. That's part of like the real power of ChatGPT. So that is in the encoding process. This is done using a process called tokenization, which essentially just splits the text into individual words or subwords and maps them to unique numerical IDs. After that's done, we go to processing. So essentially the encoded input is fed into the transformer or the neural network, which processes it to generate a probable distribution over the possible next words. Essentially, based off of this, what would it guess the next word should be? What would it guess the next response should be? So this involves many different layers of computation, each of which applies a different transformation to the input. So after that, we get the output. The model outputs a ranked list of the most likely next words based on the probabilities generated in the previous step. So all of that context is to get to our main point, which is why does ChatGPT have a maximum capacity when it comes to putting inputs in and receiving them out? Why is there length limits, and kind of what is that all about? So as impressive as ChatGPT is, it does have its limits. One of the most significant limitations is what's known as max capacity. So this refers to the maximum amount of text that the model can process in a single interaction. So once the input text exceeds this limit, the model starts to break down and it produces significantly less accurate or even nonsensical outputs. And that's just to do with, how big a question or an ask or how much content you're giving it. And the reason for this limitation has to do with the way the neural network that ChatGPT is running on is designed. So neural networks have a fixed amount of memory, which is used to store the parameters or weights that determine the neural network's process information. So these parameters are learned during the training process and are used to make predictions on new data. So the amount of memory available in a neural network is limited by the hardware it's running on. So for example, if ChatGPT is running on a server with 16 gigs of RAM, it can only store 16 gigs worth of parameters at any given time. So if the input text is too long, it's going to require more memory than the model actually has available, which can cause errors or crashes, which we see at as ChatGPT is kind of new, and they they can't give this thing unlimited RAM for every single person using this because obviously as a free tool, this thing's incredibly expensive. It's costing them millions of dollars just to run the computational power on this thing. And so they do have limitations, which we see sometimes when our chats crash or when it has limitations on how much you can put into it. Another factor that contributes to ChatGPT's kind of reaching its limits is the complexity of the input. So the model's designed to process natural language, which can be highly variable and nuanced. So if the input text contains many unusual or complex words, phrases, sentence structures, and it's super long, the model's going to struggle to make an accurate prediction because it's just not used to so much. And like we talked about earlier, it has limitations in its compute power. So what happens when ChatGPT reaches its maximum capacity or it's hits its max on a prompt? We've seen it before. Sometimes it will crash. Sometimes it will say error. Try again. Sometimes you got to rephrase stuff. When it reaches that, the model's going to also start to produce less relevant and less accurate responses. So that's just something to be aware of. So to prevent this from happening, developers need to be aware of ChatGPT's maximum, or it pretty much has limits, and design their applications accordingly. So this might involve limiting the length of the input text, the pre-processing, the text to remove. They could use pre-processing, essentially like a developer, if they were integrating this into an application they were making, they could create pre-processing so that when their users are inputting text, it's pre-processed and the text removes complex or irrelevant information, right? So like essentially developers using this for their own tools can make additional layers before it hits the ChatGPT API to make it more likely to give a good response. So I believe that as artificial intelligence continues to evolve and improve, it's likely that we're going to see even more advanced language models in the future. However, at the moment, the models that we have do have their own set of limitations and challenges. So it's just important to understand that, and it's going to be pretty cool to see how this evolves in the future. If you are looking for an innovative and creative community of people using ChatGPT, you need to join our ChatGPT creators community. I'll drop a link in the description to this podcast. We'd love to see you there, where we share tips and tricks of what is working in ChatGPT. It's a lot easier than a podcast, as you can see screenshots, you can share and comment on things that are currently working. So if this sounds interesting to you, check out the link in the comment. We'd love to have you in the community. Thanks for tuning in to the AI Hustle podcast. If you could do us a massive favor, we would really, really appreciate it if you could leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. This helps people find the podcast. It helps people know this is a good place to go. And we would really, really appreciate it, as it helps us continue to bring on incredible guests and share incredible content for you to listen to.